What would you do if you woke up in someone else's body, starving, broke, and responsible for 3 women who wanted you dead? That is not a hypothetical. That is exactly how this story begins. Northern China, 1960, the Great Famine. A soul from another time crashes into a body named Chinfong. A man so useless the village had stopped noticing him years ago. No parents, no wife, no food, not even a single grain of rice in the jar. If you were going to transmigrate into someone, you would pick a rich young master with servants and a warm bed. This soul got the village deadbeat with a dirt floor and a reputation worth less than the dirt on it. But before Chinfong can even process the memory fragments still firing through his skull, like tiny bullets, he hears something. A woman crying, right underneath him, on the brick bed. Her name is Liu, 20 years old, and by every account, the prettiest face in the whole village. And the reason she is here, in this man's house, on this cold night, is the most embarrassing thing Chinfong could have inherited. The original Chinfong had promised her half a unit of meat in exchange for her company. Her sister-in-law was starving. Her 4-year-old niece could barely walk from hunger. So Liu agreed, half a unit of pork. That was the deal. There is one small problem. There was never any meat. Not a sliver, not a bone, not even the memory of pork. The original Chinfong had scammed a starving woman with imaginary food, and now this new soul had to face the consequences. Outside, the wind was tearing through the valley at -30 degrees. The window paper blew clean off. Freezing air flooded the room like a living thing. And when the storm finally settled, Liu was crying into the blanket and Chinfong was staring at the ceiling. Then both their stomachs growled. At the exact same time, she asked where her meat was. He searched the house with the quiet desperation of a man who already knew the answer. The stove was empty. The rice container was spotless. The jar in the corner held nothing but air. And then, in a dark corner, he found one thing. One single corn bun, slightly warm, slightly stinky, about 2 ounces of compressed regret. Liu watched him with wide, hopeful eyes, and he had to tell her the truth. There was no meat. There had never been any meat. Her brain short-circuited. She looked at the bed, looked at herself, and started crying in a way that had no elegance to it whatsoever. You promised me half a unit of meat. I give you my body for it. My niece is 4 years old and cannot walk from hunger. Why did you lie? Fair questions, every single one of them. But here is the thing. Chinfong was also starving. His stomach was eating itself from the inside, and in his hand was a corn bun too small to feed one person, let alone 4. So he made a decision, cold, logical, survival brain decision. Dead men cannot help anybody. You have to be alive to keep being alive. He ate the corn bun. Right there, right in front of her, every single bite. Liu froze on her knees like someone had pressed pause on her entire existence. Then she launched herself at him with all 10 fingernails aimed at his face. She was swinging and kicking and screaming threats that would have terrified a lesser man. But she weighed almost nothing. Chinfong caught both her wrists with one hand and she dangled there like a wet shirt on a clothesline. Cursing burns calories. She deflated fast. She collapsed onto the cold floor, out of insults, out of energy, out of everything. And then someone knocked on the door. "Shu, are you in there? Open up." Her sister-in-law, Lulin, was standing outside, and behind her, a tiny voice. "Annie, Annie," the 4-year-old niece, shouting. Liu's face cycled through every color panic has to offer, white, red, then straight to gray. She threw herself at the blanket trying to cover the bed, but her hands were shaking too badly to grab the fabric. Then she spun around and begged Chinfong with pure terror in her eyes. "Don't open that door, please. I'll do anything. Just let me get dressed first." This was not fear of being hit. This was a specific, industrial strength shame of someone whose secret was one door away from being discovered. The knocking kept going, Lulin's voice climbing higher with each pass. The little girl's voice getting weaker. Chinfong walked straight for the door. Liu tried to chase him. Her legs gave out. She crashed into the side of the bed and went down with one arm reaching toward him. He lifted the wooden latch and the door swung open. -30 degrees slapped him in the face like a personal insult from winter itself. Standing in the doorway was Lulin, early 20s, but looking about 45. Face the color of old newspaper. In her arms, little Shaolin, 4 years old, head drooping like an unwatered plant. Lulin tried to look past him into the house. "Shu, where is Shu? Let me in." "No meat," Chinfong said, same energy as announcing the weather. Lulin's eyes narrowed. She'd heard every kind of crying in this village over the years. But when Liu's voice finally crawled out from behind him, cracking and shaking, Lulin understood immediately. That was not sad crying. That was not angry crying. That was someone used my dignity as a doormat crying. She looked at Chinfong. Her pupils expanded like the small moons during an eclipse. Chinfong, what did you do to Shu? A normal person would have chosen softer words, made excuses, taken the scenic route around the truth. Chinfong was not a normal person. Your sister-in-law, he said. I slept with her. Clean, efficient, like splitting firewood with one swing. The silence that followed could have killed something. Inside the house, Liu screamed at him to shut up. Wait a late. Lulin's eyelids started twitching, her knees buckled. She tilted sideways and started going down like a character in a soap opera. Chinfong grabbed her arm before her head introduced itself to the door frame, but Shaolin flew out of her arms and rolled across the ground like a rag doll. The kid weighed nothing, like catching air wrapped in cotton. Lulin was completely unconscious, lips trembling, face pale as fresh snow. She had been running on fumes, and his announcement popped the last one. Shaolin lay face down in the snow and whispered one word so quietly it almost disappeared. Mama. Liu came tumbling off the bed, shoved Chinfong aside, and dropped next to her sister-in-law. Sis, wake up. She was slapping Lulin's face gently, but the woman's head flopped like a cooked noodle. Then Liu turned on him. This is your fault. Why did you tell her? Why couldn't you keep your mouth shut? Because I'm not a turtle hiding in a shell, Chinfong thought, but he kept that one to himself. He crouched down and checked Lulin's breathing. Still working, not dead, just knocked out by the triple cocktail of starvation, shock, and devastation. Shaolin started crying too. Tiny broken sounds. Annie, Mama's hungry. Shaolin is hungry. That sentence split Liu apart. Half worried about her sister-in-law on the ground, half destroyed by her niece on the floor. Chinfong looked around and took inventory of his new life. One woman unconscious. One woman crying. One child starving on the floor. One him, broke. For people approximately one business day away from death. Crammed into a dirt house while the mountain buried itself in snow. All right, he said. Quit crying. He reached down, scooped Lulin off the ground, and carried her to the bed. She weighed about as much as a large opinion. He set her down on the warm brick surface, and she let out a tiny groan. Still alive. Good enough. Liu launched herself at him, terrified he was going to do something else. Relax, he said. Who wants to? He went to the stove instead and tossed in firewood. At least they would not freeze. Then he stood back and surveyed his 3 new burdens. On the bed, Lulin, unconscious. Beside her, Shaolin, barely breathing. In the corner, Liu, curled up like a wounded animal. He had not asked for any of this. These 3 were anchors tied to his ankles while he was already drowning. He made himself a deal right there. If they could be useful down the road, they could stay. If not, this lifeboat had a weight limit and the captain came first. Liu came at him again, fists bouncing off his back like cotton balls against brick. He reached back, grabbed her arm, without turning around, and steered her onto the bed with one smooth push. Can you behave? Isn't this messy enough already? She looked at her unconscious sister-in-law, looked at Shaolin on the bed, did the math, and bit her tongue. Smart girl. Annoying, but smart. He picked Shaolin up off the floor himself. The child weighed nothing. 4 years old and lighter than a scarecrow made of straw. He put her on the warm bed beside Lulin, and she burrowed immediately into her mother's side and went still. Something about that hit him in a way he did not want to examine, so he locked it in a drawer and moved on. Lulin's eyes cracked open minutes later, blurry, confused, scanning the room. She spotted Liu first, then her gaze drifted to Chinfong, and he watched the memory reload behind her eyes in real time. Her face twisted, and she launched herself at him like a woman possessed. You animal! How could you trick you? Are you even human? He gave her a light push, one push. She stumbled sideways like a bowling pin in a breeze and came right back up. You ruined my sister-in-law. You worthless scumbag. You deserve to be shot. Then Liu cut in softly. Sis, stop. It's my fault. And then they were both off, bouncing blame back and forth like a ping-pong match played in a burning house. He's a beast. No, it's my fault. No, he's a beast. No, really, it's my fault. To starving women who could barely stand up. burning their last calories on an argument that solved nothing. Enough, Chinfong cut in. Save your energy for staying alive. That shut Lulin mid-sentence. Her mouth hung open for the full seconds like a fish on dry land. They tried to leave anyway, to women who hadn't eaten in days, trying to hold each other up. Stumbling toward the door, neither one could actually support the other. Gravity was winning against both of them simultaneously. Lulin bent down to grab Shaolin and her vision went dark. Almost a repeat performance of the dramatic fainting from 5 minutes ago. Liu picked up the child instead. Shaolin buried her face in Liu's neck, and even her body heat felt cold. That is a special kind of starving, when even your warmth runs out. They shuffled toward the door, 3 broken people walking into a blizzard. And that is when Chinfong's brain finally started doing something useful. Where do you find food when there is no food? When every house in the village is empty? When the whole mountain is buried under snow? That collection, the original Chinfong had lent things to people, done favors, made the shady transactions that village deadbeats accumulate over a lifetime of being everyone's last option. People owed him, and it was time to collect. He walked to the door and spoke without turning around. If you 3 want to survive, stay here. I'm going out. I'll be back soon. He walked into the freezing hellscape without another word. Behind him, Lulin and Liu stared at his back with 2 sets of confused, angry, starving eyes. Lulin was doing the math. Home was far. Shaolin was fragile. There was nothing at their place anyway. Liu's mouth said no. Her knees said yes. God, yes, please. They both looked at Shaolin, tiny and barely breathing, and swallowed their pride like it was broken glass going down. They went back inside. Sometimes survival tastes worse than starvation, but you swallow it anyway. Chinfong kicked down the gate of the Li family home like he was delivering a pizza nobody ordered. Inside, the picture of comfort. Papa Li sitting cross-legged on the heated bed, puffing his tobacco pipe like a retired emperor. Mama Wang tending clothes on the edge, the older son Jetsai squatting by the fire, the younger son Jimmy leaning against the wall with his eyes closed, napping like he owed nobody anything. Chinfong pushed the door open and cold wind followed him in like his personal +1. He scanned the whole family like a cashier scanning groceries and got straight to it. Your 2 sons borrowed half a unit of meat from me. Today, they pay up. The room went quiet. The tobacco pipe froze halfway to Li's mouth. Wang's needle stopped mid-stitch. What meat? Li played dumb. Who borrowed anything? I don't know about this. Then ask your boys. Jetsai stared at the fire like it had suddenly become the most fascinating thing in the world. Jimmy cracked one eye open and gave Chinfong the laziest side-eye in human history. The back and forth went on for 3 minutes. Denials, confused head scratching, bad acting all around. Then Chinfong spotted something beautiful sitting on the edge of the bed, a clay pot with a bowl flipped upside down on top. He lifted the bowl to golden corn cakes, still warm, steam still rising. Well, your family's eating corn cakes, huh? Wang launched off the bed like a rocket. Hey, put that down. That's our family's food. She bounced off Chinfong's arm like a tennis ball off a wall. And my half unit of meat. That was my food. Where is it? Li's face changed colors. Not scared, just insulted. A respected village elder, confronted by the neighborhood deadbeat in front of his whole family. His pride was having an exceptionally bad day. Jimmy finally pushed off the wall and stepped forward, chest out, sleeve rolled up. Chinfong, don't push your luck. You're a nobody, a village bum. He threw a real punch, aimed directly at Chinfong's face. Decent speed, actual commitment. Chinfong tilted his head left. The fist sailed past his ear like a bird that forgot how to land. Then came the slap. One clean, perfectly calibrated crack across Jimmy's left cheek. Not hard enough to break anything. Just hard enough to live in his nightmares for a decade. The sound bounced off every wall in the room. Jimmy spun like a top. Shoulders hit the bed frame. Back of his skull thumped the wall. And little chunks of dried mud rained down on his head like sad confetti. He slid down the wall and landed on the floor. Eyes trying to remember what planet he was on. The room went absolutely silent. Wang's sewing needle fell onto the bed. She did not even notice. Li's pipe hung frozen in midair. Chinfong walked over and put his foot on Jimmy's back. Not stomping, just resting. Pinning him down like a fish on a cutting board. Listen carefully. Half a unit of meat. 1 unit of corn flour. Interest. You don't pay. I rip your leg off and burn it for firewood. Jimmy screamed threats from the floor. His father tried to appeal to reason. Chinfong replied with a countdown. 1. Lee bolted for the other room. 2. Wang chased him. 3. From behind the wall, the sound of lids banging, jars scraping, boxes flying open. The beautiful symphony of people finding things they swore did not exist 30 seconds ago. 4. Here. It's here. Lee's voice cracked through the wall, soaked in tears. He came stumbling back in, holding a chunk of frozen meat wrapped in cloth and a fabric bag of corn flour. Sweating in -30 weather. Funny how a foot on someone's spine turns. We don't have anything into here it is. Please stop. People are not mean because they want to be. They are mean because they think you are too soft to do anything about it. Show them different and suddenly everyone remembers their manners and finds their misplaced groceries. Chinfong inspected the meat. Frozen solid, right weight, not rotten. He stuffed it inside his coat. Then his hand reached toward Wang's cloth bag. She yanked it behind her back like a child hiding candy. That's our corn flour. You said half a unit of meat. You got it. What else do you want? Interest, he said. 2 syllables. That was all he needed. They argued. They begged. Wang cursed at him in a range of octaves that was genuinely impressive for someone claiming to be starving. He grabbed the corner of the bag. She grabbed the other end. 2 adults playing tug-of-war over corn flour in the middle of a famine. Lee finally told his wife to let go. Better to lose 1 unit than have him take 10. Her grip loosened. Chinfong pulled it clean and walked out the front door like he owned the whole village. Behind him, the Lee household collapsed into itself. The old man reaching for his pipe with shaking hands. Jimmy crawling up the wall to standing, cheek puffed up like bread dough, whispering that they could not let this go. Lee's response was the only smart thing anyone in that family said all day. Stay away from him. Don't start trouble. Chinfong trudged back through the snow and knocked on his own door. Lulin cracked it open with a face that said, I hate you, but I live here now. He dropped the bag of corn flour on the counter. Then he pulled the frozen chunk of meat from his coat and set it down beside it. Is that meat? Lulin whispered, creeping closer. Eyes locked on that frozen brick of pork like it was a diamond sitting on his dirty kitchen counter. No, it's a decorative rock. Yes, it's meat. Her lips started trembling. 5 minutes ago she had wanted to murder him. Now she was looking at him like he had just walked on water. Funny how half a unit of frozen pork rewrites your entire opinion of a person. She called for Liu. Liu hobbled out and her jaw dropped when her eyes hit the stove. Meat, corn flour. Her mouth stayed open for about 4 seconds. You could have parked a bicycle in it. Neither of them had expected this. The village deadbeat had actually delivered. Through questionable methods, but he had delivered. He let them have their moment. Then he ruined it. You'd have done staring. Start cooking. One of you cuts. One of you does the fire. Liu's head whipped toward him. You want me to cook for you? Because I'm the one who brought the groceries. Don't like it. Door's right there. Leave and you get 0. She opened her mouth to say fine. I'll leave. And then her brain caught up to her pride halfway through the sentence. She remembered Lil shouting on the bed. The cold outside. No firewood at home. Nothing at home. Her voice stopped like a car running out of fuel on a highway. Lulin stepped past Liu and quietly apologized to Chinfong. Please don't kick us out. The woman who had called him an animal 10 minutes ago had just apologized. He respected it. She was not doing it for herself. She was doing it for her kid and her sister-in-law. A mother protecting her people, even if it meant swallowing a bowling ball of pride. She grabbed the cleaver and got to work on the meat, frozen solid, so she boiled water first. Thawed the surface, then sliced. Skin, fat, gristle, every microscopic shred scraped into the bowl. In a famine, you do not throw away anything. Liu squatted by the stove and started the fire. Corn stalks crackled in the firebox and the bellows started pumping. That rhythmic clunking sound filled the kitchen like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Shaolin appeared from nowhere and parked herself next to the pot, nose practically inside it, sniffing hard enough to inhale the steam. Without seasoning, this was going to taste like hot regret, but to a kid who had not eaten in days, it smelled like a 5-star restaurant. Chinfong tried to silence the child's demands with one threat. One more peep, and you don't eat at all. Shaolin up behind her mother's legs and clamped her mouth shut so fast he heard her teeth click. But her eyes stayed locked on that pot, obedient, but not surrendering visual contact with dinner. Clever kid. Corn cakes went onto the walls of the iron pot in a circle. Golden discs lined up like tiny soldiers. The meat went in with them, stew and bread in one pot. And then, miracle of miracles, There was still salt in the jar. Chinfong was genuinely shocked. Within minutes, the smell of meat broth leaked through the pot lid like a promise. It was not fancy, it was not seasoned properly, but in that freezing dirt kitchen, it smelled like the gates of something better had cracked open just enough. After dinner, the world was pitch black outside and barely lighter inside. The oil lamp burned down to a flicker the size of a pea, begging for retirement. "Kill the lamp," he said, wasting oil. Lulin turned the wick down and the flame gave to sad little shivers and quit. Darkness dropped on the room like a curtain. Shaolin was already unconscious. She had eaten a few chunks of meat and half a corn cake, and her belly was round as a little drum. Head hit the pillow. Battery pull. Lights out. Chinfong announced it was time to sleep. Everyone climbed onto the brick bed. For people lined up like sardines in a tin can. Him on the outside edge. Liu right next to him. Shaolin in the middle. Lulin against the wall. Turning over required a committee vote and advance notice. Then he put his arm around Liu's waist. She went stiff as a frozen fish. Every muscle locked simultaneously. She grabbed his wrist with both hands and pushed and pulled. His arm did not move. He pulled her closer instead, her back pressed flat against his chest. "Let go," she hissed, voice crushed down to a whisper small enough to fit inside a thimble. "There are people right here. We're sleeping," he said. "This is sleeping. All the blankets went to the kid. If I don't hold you, you'll freeze." She had no comeback for that. Logically, it made sense. Emotionally, she wanted to find something sharp. She squirmed twice more. His arm tightened. "Keep wiggling, and I'll do more than just hold you." She stopped moving so fast, you would think someone hit her pause button. Her face was generating enough heat to cook rice. He could not see it in the dark, but he could feel the radiation coming off her cheeks, like a small campfire. Every exhale of his landed on the back of her neck like clockwork, and she lay there counting each one, teeth clenched, fist balled, manly writing his obituary. On the other side of Shaolin, Lulin was wide awake, eyes open, staring at a ceiling she could not see. Her ears had been promoted to management. Every rustle of cotton, every whispered word, she caught all of it. She knew Liu was enduring, but the man had brought food, and nobody had the standing to tell him off anymore. "You cannot bite the hand that literally just fed you." Lulin rolled toward the wall, pulled the blanket corner over her ears. Did not help. Still heard everything. Sometimes having functional hearing is a curse. Liu's resistance drained out of her slowly, muscle by muscle, like ice melting in slow motion. Exhaustion plus warmth plus empty stomach equals surrender. She was still crying, but quieter now, more like leaking than sobbing. By morning, she was wrapped around him like a koala on a eucalyptus tree, face smooshed against his chest, hands gripping his shirt, legs tangled with his. 0% of last night's warrior princess remaining, just a tired, hungry girl holding on to the warmest thing in the room. He looked down at this human octopus attached to his torso and thought, this sleeping arrangement needs an upgrade immediately. Separate rooms, walls, doors that lock. A man has needs that a crowded family bed cannot accommodate. He extracted himself quietly, grabbed the hunting bough from the corner, slung the quiver over his shoulder, and pocketed the last corn cake. Cannot hunt on an empty stomach. He pushed open the door and stepped into the gray morning. Snow had stopped. Wind had quit. The world was white and still and brutally cold. Behind him, 3 women slept in his bed. One angry, one conflicted, one too young to understand any of it. All 3 completely dependent on whatever he dragged home today. No pressure. The second his boots hit the snow, Lulin was up reheating the half bowl of soup he had left behind the previous night. He had eaten an entire pheasant down to the bone marrow. The idea that he could not finish a few scraps was laughable. He left that bowl on purpose, but if anyone asked, he was full. Lulin carried the warm soup to the bed, where Liu was cosplaying as a stubborn burrito. The smell of reheated chicken broth filled the room, and Liu's stomach immediately betrayed her entire political position with a thunderous growl. "I won't eat his food," Liu declared from inside the blanket fort of her pride. Lulin hit her with the big sister speech, "The face cannot fill your belly" speech. Look at Shaolin. She ate meat yesterday, and today she has color in her cheeks again. And the finishing blow, if you die, he will just find another girl to warm his bed by tomorrow night. And then, what was the point of any of it? That one was a cruise missile aimed directly at Liu's logic center, and it landed perfectly. Lulin even threw herself on the grenade. "If he bothers you again, I'll take your place." That cracked Liu wide open. She burst into tears, begged her sister-in-law not to sacrifice herself, and somewhere between the crying and arguing, her hands found the bowl and her mouth found the soup. She drank it like someone trying to inhale a river, tears falling into the broth, crying and slurping simultaneously. She licked the bowl so clean it did not need washing, every drop of oil, every crumb of meat, gone. Then she set the bowl down, hated him, hated herself, and hated the fact that one bowl of leftover soup had demolished her hunger strike. In under 4 minutes. Stubbornness has a shelf life. Turns out it is about 18 hours. Meanwhile, Chinfong was up on the mountain chewing a corn cake that tasted like compressed sawdust. The forest was dead quiet. Snow piled on every branch like nature's laziest decorator had dumped white paint on everything and called it art. He crouched down and spotted tracks in the fresh powder, 3 toes forward, 1 backward, edges still crisp. He brushed aside some loose snow nearby and found a nugget of dark green droppings that had not yet frozen solid, still warm. Whatever left this behind was very close. Wild pheasant. He did not follow the tracks directly. That was amateur hour. He looped wide and came in from downwind, moving like a shadow with somewhere to be. Winter pheasants are paranoid little creatures. Hear one twig snap, and they are airborne before you can blink. But they have one fatal weakness. They are greedy. Find a patch with seeds, and they keep coming back like a gambler who once won 5 coins at a slot machine. He dropped low, practically kissing the snow, and crawled forward inch by inch. Then he peeked over a ridge of snow, and there he was. One absolutely gorgeous male pheasant, white ring around the neck, long tail feathers dragging in the snow behind him like a tiny feathered king wearing a cape. About a pound, maybe a little over, head buried in the snow, digging for seeds, completely unaware that death was admiring his outfit from 30 meters away. Chinfong pulled an arrow slowly, seated it on the string, drew back. The pheasant kept digging, still being handsome, still having the last carefree moment of his life. The arrow hissed through the cold air and punched into the bird's chest. He flapped twice, confused, already dying, legs kicking at nothing. Chinfong sprinted over, grabbed him by the head, and finished it with one sharp twist. Sorry about your neck. Nothing personal. Your groceries. He plucked the bird on the walk back, 1 step, 1 handful of feathers. Feathers flying behind him like the world's most disturbing trail of breadcrumbs. He also grabbed a bundle of firewood on the way home, multitasking. Because when you are the sole provider for 3 dependents and yourself, every trip counts double. He knocked on the door at mid-afternoon. Lulin opened it and reached out for the firewood. Then her eyes drifted to his other hand. She froze completely, like someone had pressed her pause button with a brick. In his hand dangled a fully plucked, gutted, headless pheasant, frozen stiff as a board. Her mouth fell open and stayed there. He could have parked a corn cake in it. She carried that pheasant into the bedroom like a religious artifact. Liu took one look and her brain short-circuited. She stared at the bird, then at him, then back at the bird, mouth opening and closing with no words coming out. He dropped onto the bed, kicked off his boots, and pointed his chin at the dead pheasant. You're going to stare at it until it comes back to life. Cook it. I'm starving. Lulin snapped out of her trance, wiped her eyes. Yeah, she was crying again. This woman cried more than a broken faucet. She hustled to the kitchen. Yesterday's meal had put enough fuel in her tank to actually move without collapsing. Liu gave him the coldest, most dismissive snort in human history and limped off the bed to help her sister-in-law. But she went to help cook his food, and she did not argue about it this time. Progress. The iron pot bubbled like a witch's cauldron by 4 in the afternoon. When the meat hit the boiling water, the smell crawled through the house like an invisible ghost made entirely of deliciousness. In 1960, smelling actual meat cooking was basically a religious experience. Lulin's brain was doing somersaults at the stove. Yesterday she had wanted to chop him into pieces. Today she was happily chopping a chicken for him. Funny what a hot meal does to a grudge. He served himself first. To drumsticks, a fat slab of breast meat, a full bowl of soup. The captain eats before the crew. Maritime law, probably. Shaolin got a bowl of broth and 2 soft pieces of chicken. She thanked him through a mouthful of everything and called him Uncle Chun. Lulin got a generous serving and nodded so gratefully her head might have fallen off. Then came Liu's bowl, half a serving, 1 chicken wing, a few scraps. He slid it across to her. She was sitting in the far corner of the bed radiating hatred like a space heater, running on pure spite. Come eat, he said. She turned her head away. I'm not eating. He laughed. Look at you, all dignified. What's wrong? My pheasant isn't fancy enough for the princess? She snorted. Anything you touched is dirty. The temperature in the room dropped 15 degrees. Lulin nearly choked on her chicken and grabbed Liu's sleeve in full panic. Shui, this is meat. Come eat. Liu yanked free. You can eat his food, sis. I can't. You already forgot what he did to me. Chinfong put his chopsticks down. Say that again. Liu straightened her spine and puffed out her chest like a tiny general making a last stand. I said I won't eat. I'll starve before I take one bite from you. He nodded. Perfect. Then he picked up her bowl and dumped the chicken into Shaolin's serving. Here, kid, bonus round. Shaolin clapped her hands and dove in. Philosophical questions about food redistribution were above the pay grade of a 4-year-old. Liu froze. She had expected him to beg, to insist, to force her. That was how her mind had scripted it. He just bit into his corn cake with a crunch that echoed off the walls. Let me make something clear. In this house, I am the sky. The food I bring does not fall from clouds. If you don't want to eat, the door is right there. Go outside and drink the northwest wind for dinner. Lulin tried to smooth things over, and he silenced her with one look. Say one more word, and I'll take back the chicken from your kid. Lulin's mouth sealed shut like it was welded. She tried to save half her bowl for Liu. He walked over and ate her leftovers right in front of her face. He chewed bones extra loud. Crunch, crunch. Slurped the soup like he was trying to vacuum the bowl clean. Liu sat in her corner with eyes turning red. She was hungry, devastatingly hungry. The smell of chicken stew was torturing her nostrils. Her stomach had abandoned her pride entirely and was staging a full biological rebellion. The growl was so loud it rattled the silence like a drum. He paused mid-bite, turned toward the window, and said with perfect deadpan, Huh? Thunder during a snowstorm. That's unusual. Liu buried her face in her knees and cried silently, shoulders shaking, the full performance. He finished eating, let out the most satisfying belch of either of his lives, and leaned back. 2 days since he had woken up in this frozen nightmare, and he had finally had a proper full meal. Life was looking up slightly from a very low starting point. He had left half a serving of soup in the bottom of his bowl, on purpose. He looked away. Lulin picked it up and carried it to the kitchen without a word. The sky went black by 5. The stove died down. Cold air started sneaking back through every crack. Liu was still in her corner, no food in her stomach, no heat in her body, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. That thin cotton outfit was about as useful as wrapping yourself in good intentions. The second half of every night was the dangerous part. When the fire dies and the temperature drops like a rock off a cliff, a man needs insulation. He reached over, grabbed Liu's arm, and dragged her in. She yelped and tried to fight. But a woman who has not eaten all day fighting a man who just demolished the chicken legs is not a fair matchup. She crashed into his chest like a shopping bag being pulled off a shelf. No traction, no resistance. Just surrender. Let go of me. Her palms pushed against his chest with all the force of a gentle breeze. He wrapped his arms around her waist and locked her in. The girl was skinny, no fat anywhere, but the engineering in other departments was surprisingly solid for someone running on 0 calories. She squirmed, she twisted, she called him every farm animal in existence, all in frantic whispers. You're disgusting. Don't touch me. I'm touching my own woman. Perfectly normal. Who is your woman? You slept with me, unless you're planning to belong to someone else now. Dead silence. He had hit the logic button. In 1960 rural China, that math was final. She tried to bite his shoulder. Actual teeth, actual trajectory. He caught her jaw with one hand. Easy there, wolf girl. You're eating my food, sleeping in my house. Now you want to eat me too. Pick a lane. I didn't eat your food. Your sister-in-law and niece did. Or are they not your family anymore? Keep squirming and I'll find something more productive to do with this energy. I've got free time. She turned to stone, every muscle locked. That threat worked better than any lock or chain ever invented. She knew he was not bluffing. His track record of doing exactly what he said was unfortunately perfect. Good girl, stay still. I'm warm. You're cold. Basic thermodynamics. Nothing personal. She lay there rigid as a wooden board, making tiny crying sounds into the dark. On the other side of the sleeping child, Lulin was wide awake. lying there with the blanket pulled over her ears, performing sleep so hard she deserved an award. 3 years without a husband, 3 years of solo survival, raising a child, protecting her sister-in-law on nothing. She had forgotten what a man's presence even felt like, and now there was one on her bed, young, strong, loud. She heard everything, Liu's muffled protests, his casual threats, the sound of two bodies settling against each other. Part of her felt guilty for not intervening. Part of her could not afford to. That pheasant he had brought home had demolished whatever was left of her resistance to him. A man who hunts in a famine is not a man you argue with. He is a man you keep happy, keep fed, keep clothes. Because the alternative was -30 in an empty kitchen. She buried her face in the pillow and tried to think about literally anything else. It was not working. Liu had finally stopped fighting physics. Her body unclenched slowly, muscle by muscle, like ice melting in slow motion. By morning she was wrapped around him like a koala on a eucalyptus tree, hands gripping his shirt, face buried in his chest, looking like the most innocent creature on earth. Sleeping Liu and awake Liu were two completely different women. He preferred the sleeping version, significantly less annoying. He extracted himself carefully and stepped outside. Wall of white. Snow was falling so thick and fast it looked like the sky was vomiting cotton. The yard was buried knee-deep, visibility about 10 feet before the world became a white blur. His hunting plans evaporated. Going into the mountains and this was suicide. You would lose direction in 5 minutes and freeze in 20. Even he was not stupid enough to try that. Lulin appeared behind him, took one look at the blizzard, and her face crumpled with worry. He shut the door and sealed them all back inside. She immediately turned away from him, cheeks flushing, unable to make eye contact after everything she had overheard the previous night. For people trapped in a tiny house by a blizzard, limited food, nowhere to go, nothing to do, a lesser man would have sat around feeling sorry for himself. Chinfong started building. He dug through the house and found dried willow sticks and a ball of hemp rope, older than the village itself. He sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out his knife, and started carving, with shavings falling like tiny snowflakes with a purpose. Shaolin crawled across the bed until her chin was propped on both hands right next to him. Uncle Chun, what are you making? A thing. What kind of thing? A bird trap. Her 4-year-old brain processed this for exactly 10 seconds. Can you eat it? He almost cut himself laughing. No, but it catches things you can eat. Her eyes went supernova. What kind of things? He explained the whole mechanism, corn bits scattered on snow, frame propped with a trigger stick, long string run to a hiding spot, birds walk in, you yank the string, trap drops, dinner served. He did the pulling motion with his hand for dramatic effect. Shaolin gasped like he had just explained magic. Wow, Uncle Chun, you're so smart. This child was his #1 fan, his only fan. Actually, he took what he could get. But the moment Shaolin started clinging to his knee with worship in her eyes, oh, you could not take it anymore? She lunged across the bed, grabbed the child's arm, and yanked her away from him like he was radioactive. Shaolin, come here. Don't bother him. Annie, what did I do? Don't bother him. She pulled the kid behind her back and stared at Chinfong like he was recruiting her niece into a criminal organization. He stopped carving and gave her his best amused look. What's the problem? I'm teaching the kid survival skills. She doesn't need your teaching. Cool. When I catch sparrows after the snow stops, you don't eat any. She clenched her jaw so hard he heard her teeth creak. Then she leaned down to Shaolin's ear. Remember what Annie says. Stay away from him. He's a bad man. Shaolin looked at Liu, looked at Chinfong, looked back at Liu. Her tiny brain processed the contradiction for 2 full seconds. But Uncle Chun brings meat. Bad people don't bring meat. Liu's mouth opened. Nothing came out. She had been logically dismantled by a 4-year-old using the simplest moral framework in existence. Food equals good, no food equals bad. And by that metric, Chinfong was the greatest hero this household had ever seen. He went back to tying knots on his trap. Shoo, your face is thicker than a city wall. You eat my food, sleep in my house, and tell a child I'm the villain. At least have the honesty to be a grateful hypocrite instead of a loud one. Direct hit. She turned the color of a boiled beet and retreated to the far corner. Could not find a single word to fire back. What could she say? Yes, I eat your pheasant every night, but I do it angrily? Not exactly the argument she thought it was. He finished the trap, tested the trigger, clean release, fast drop. Any sparrow dumb enough to walk under this was going straight from freedom to his stomach. In about 3 seconds, Lulin came back inside from shoveling snow and stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath, watching him work. He did not look up, but he could feel her eyes on his hands, his face, his shoulders. The way women look at a man when they are recalculating something important in their heads. 3 days ago she had called him an animal. 2 days ago he was that scumbag. Yesterday he became Funzy. Today she was standing in the doorway watching him carve a bird trap with a knife. Snow melting in her hair, thinking thoughts she would never admit out loud. This man might be the worst human being I have ever met, but he is also the reason we are still alive. And he looks kinda good holding that knife. Feed someone 3 days in a row and suddenly the devil starts looking handsome. While he wove the trap, the 2 women slipped off to the kitchen for what they clearly believed was a private conversation. Here is the thing about dirt houses with thin walls. They are basically loudspeakers with a roof. He heard every word. Liu stormed in complaining that he was corrupting little Shaolin. Teaching a starving child to trap food during a famine was apparently an act of villainy. Lulin tried to calm her down. He's teaching her useful skills. Liu wasn't having it. You're taking his side? Then Lulin pulled out the heavy truth. Be honest with yourself. Without him, where will we be right now? Dead. That's where. You ate the chicken soup. You ate the meat this morning. Remember when we went begging to your uncle's family? They wouldn't even open the door. Chinfong kicked down someone else's door and brought meat back for us. This world doesn't run on manners. It runs on people tough enough to take what they need. Silence from Liu. The sound of a woman whose argument just got dismantled by her own sister-in-law using nothing but facts. Liu played her last card, voice cracking. He's still a criminal. He forced me. Lulin sighed the kind of sigh that carries 3 years of widowhood, a starving daughter, and about 14 layers of exhaustion. Shui, if you really didn't want to go in that room, you wouldn't have walked through the door. You knew he was the only one who could save Shaolin. Nuclear detonation, direct hit on the truth bunker. Liu burst into tears and accused her sister-in-law of stabbing her in the heart, which Lulin kind of was, but with the surgical precision of someone who loved her too much to let her keep lying to herself. And then Lulin said something that made the kitchen go completely silent. He's actually not that bad. Chinfong nearly dropped his knife. The woman who had called him a beast 3 days ago had just defended his character. Liu caught it immediately. Sis, what did you just say? Lulin panicked, grabbed a water gourd, pretended to be suddenly fascinated by hydration. Nothing. I just meant he brings food. We need him. Liu grabbed her arm and went full interrogation. Did 2 meals of meat steal your soul? And then, in a moment of pure emotional chaos, Lulin said the thing nobody in that kitchen expected, including herself. If it'll help, I can take your place. Let me be the one who keeps him company. The silence that followed was so thick you could have built furniture out of it. Lulin immediately wanted to recapture those words. They had escaped her mouth like prisoners from a jail, unauthorized, unplanned, impossible to take back. She spun around and began frantically scooping water from a bucket, as though hydration had suddenly become the most urgent task in human history. Liu stared at her sister-in-law's back, tears running down her face. But beneath the shock she understood. This woman, widowed and starving and responsible for a 4-year-old, was volunteering to sacrifice herself so that Liu would not have to endure another night. 3 years alone, 3 years of suffering, as she was adding more to the pile so her little sister-in-law could suffer less. Liu grabbed Lulin's hands and squeezed hard. Don't you dare. I already gave him what I gave him. It's done. I'm not letting you do this. Lulin tried to smile. Didn't quite make it. I'm a widow, Shui. My reputation doesn't matter anymore, as long as you and Shaolin are alive. Liu shook her head, and for the first time since they had met, she said something that was not a curse or a complaint. I'll try to be less difficult with him. Lulin squeezed her hands back, looking relieved, but also looking like something had been locked away in a drawer she was not ready to open. Chinfong sat on the bed, tying the last knot on his trap, pretending he had not heard a single syllable of any of it. But he was filing away every word like a squirrel storing nuts for winter. The women negotiating over who gets to handle him, one volunteering as tribute to protect the other, both slowly realizing the scumbag in the next room was the only reason any of them still had a pulse. He held up the finished trap, perfect square, tight net, trigger ready. The trap on the table was for birds. But apparently he had already built a much bigger one without even trying. And these had walked right into it the moment they ate his food and started arguing over whose turn it was to keep him warm. Survival is the ultimate leash, and he was holding all three ends. The snow finally quit the next morning. A pathetic sliver of sunlight broke through the clouds like even the sun was embarrassed to show. Up this late, Chinfong stepped outside and spotted sparrows huddled on the bare elm trees, like little feathered idiots with no idea what was coming. Slingshot out. First stone. Snap. The fattest sparrow dropped into the snow like a fuzzy cannonball. The rest panicked and tried to fly. He reloaded faster than they could flap. Snap. 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 5 kills, 5 tiny corpses, each one about 80% skeleton. But in this economy, sparrow meat was practically Wagyu beef. He tossed them on the kitchen counter in front of Lulin. Pluck, gut, roast. Keep everything edible. She stared at the pile of dead birds like he had just handed her 5 golden eggs. Your aim is inhuman, Funzy. Obviously, now stop talking and start cooking. Shaolin came skidding out of the bedroom barefoot, slid across the cold floor like a tiny excited penguin, and saw the sparrows. Her entire face became one giant smile. Uncle Fo, you got sparrows? He pinched her cheek. Uncle Fong is the formal. She blinked twice, thought for half a second, and then shouted at full volume. Daddy. The room detonated. Lulin teleported across the kitchen and clamped her hand over the child's mouth so fast it created a small breeze. Liu glared at Chinfong from the bed like he had personally coached the child. He had not, but he was not mad about it either. The crisis was contained. Shaolin settled on Uncle Fo and resumed worshipping him at maximum volume. Uncle Fo is the best. Uncle Fo catches big pheasants and tiny sparrows. This was too much for Liu. Her niece, the child she had sacrificed everything for, was cheerfully defecting to the enemy camp. She pulled Shaolin into a corner and launched into a whispered lecture about how he was a liar, a villain, absolutely not to be trusted regardless of how many birds he killed. Shaolin listened politely, then dropped her counterargument with the calm confidence of a tiny lawyer who had already won the case. Uncle's family wouldn't open the door for us. Uncle Fo gives us pheasant and sparrows. Uncle Fo is good. Uncle's family is bad. Liu's brain temporarily stopped accepting inputs. She had been out-argued by a 4-year-old using a moral framework built entirely on who feeds me. And by that framework, he was a saint with a slingshot. Chinfong stepped in. Why can't she eat? I caught those birds with my own hands. I decide who eats. Liu threw a shirt at his face. He swatted it away like a fly. Your mouth says no, but every night you're curled up in my arms like a kitten. Words are cheap. Bodies are honest. You're shameless. Music to my ears. The angrier she got, the more fun he had. Some women you charm with flowers. This one you tame with pheasants and facts. And honestly, he hoped she would never completely stop fighting. The fire in her eyes was the most entertaining thing in this frozen wasteland. Stay feisty, princess. I'm enjoying every second of it. Lulin threaded 5 naked sparrows onto a wire and laid them over the hot coals. The moment fat hit heat, the smell that came off those birds was absolutely criminal. 5 sparrows the size of a fist, crispy skin, dripping oil, smelling better than anything he had eaten in either of his lives. She brought the platter in. Shaolin was vibrating at a frequency only dogs could hear. He handed the child 1 sparrow. She shoved the entire bird into her mouth like a snake unhinging its jaw, bones crunching, oil running down her chin. He gave Lulin 1. She did her usual performance of politely refusing, and he stuffed it into her hand. Stop performing. She blushed, accepted, and nibbled it with the delicate happiness of someone who had forgotten food could taste like joy. 3 sparrows left. He picked one up and walked it directly to Liu's face. She was in her corner, pretending to stare out the window while her throat bobbed up and down like a fish in float in a storm. The woman was swallowing her own saliva so aggressively it was practically cardio. He held the sparrow an inch from her nose, oil still bubbling on the skin, the smell inescapable. Take it away, she hissed through clenched teeth. He pushed it closer, nearly touching her lips. Sure about that. She pressed her back flat against the wall, trying to phase through it into another dimension. Her eyes were watering. Her stomach was screaming. Every cell in her body was staging a mutiny against her brain's orders. I said no. He pulled the sparrow back, held it under his own nose, and put on a performance. Sniffed it loudly, rolled his eyes in exaggerated pleasure. Oh man, the fat is in the bones. Better than yesterday's pheasant. Better than anything. Her stomach answered with an earthquake rumble so loud that Shaolin paused mid-chew and looked around for the source. He laughed at full volume. Your belly sounds like a thunderstorm, but your mouth is still playing tough guy. I'll starve before I eat your garbage. Perfect. Then tonight you don't sleep at all. I'll make sure of it personally. Her face went through 17 shades of red. He grabbed her chin and turned her face toward him. One bite. That's the deal, or we do this the hard way. And I promise you, the hard way involves a lot less sleeping and a lot more of what happened last night. She stared at that sparrow, golden crispy skin, tiny drops of oil catching the light. Her stomach had given up on growling and was now just screaming continuously like a broken alarm. Her resistance crumbled. He watched it happen in slow motion, the wall behind her eyes cracking brick by brick, washed away by hunger and the undeniable fact that this sparrow smelled like the best thing that had ever existed. Her lips parted slowly, teeth approaching the crispy skin, eyes half closed, ready to accept her delicious defeat. She leaned forward, mouth open. He yanked the sparrow away and popped it into his own mouth. Crunch, bone, meat, skin, fat, all demolished in one magnificent bite. He chewed with his mouth open, looking directly into her eyes, grinning like the devil at a talent show. She froze, mouth still open, body still leaning forward, blue screen of death behind her eyeballs. For 3 full seconds she existed in a state of pure, unprocessed shock. She had finally lowered her walls, opened her mouth, surrendered her pride on the altar of hunger, and he ate it right in front of her face. Wanted that. Had to slow. The look she gave him could have peeled paint off walls, could have frozen boiling water, could have sent wolves running home to their mothers. He picked up the last 2 sparrows and crunched through them slowly, savoring every bite while maintaining aggressive eye contact. Was he going to give her one? Absolutely. Was watching her suffer more entertaining than being generous? Without question. Would she eventually eat from his hand willingly? Just a matter of time. Breaking a wild horse is not about force. It is about patience, timing, and occasionally eating the carrot yourself just to remind them who is in charge. The explosion that followed was magnificent. Screaming, punching, crying. The whole fireworks display. He blocked her fists without looking and told her to save her energy for bedtime. She buried her face in her knees and sobbed. He sat there licking grease off his fingers, feeling like a king. The last sparrow on the plate he gave to Lulin. She tried to refuse. He knew she was smart enough to figure out the play. 5 sparrows. 1 for Shaolin. 1 for Lulin. He ate himself. 1 left behind. A man who chews bones for sport does not leave leftovers by accident. He left that bird so Lulin could root it to Liu's stomach via the sister-in-law express. His hands stayed clean. Liu's pride got a backdoor exit. Everybody ate. Then someone knocked on his door. In the middle of a blizzard. In a village where nobody visited him voluntarily. Suspicious. He opened it, and there stood Jet Sai, the older Li brother, shivering in a garbage coat, clutching half a shriveled sweet potato like it was a diamond ring. The man peered past Chinfong into the house, trying to spot Lulin. I'm here to see Lancy. The pet name. Familiar. Flirty. Chinfong's eyebrow went up so fast it nearly left his face. This man had been sniffing around Lulin for a while. She was a young widow. He was a creep with proximity and half a dried tuber as a romantic offering. On a night when Chinfong had just fed her roasted sparrow, Jet Sai spotted Lulin by the stove and completely ignored the man, whose brother he had watched get slapped into the wall 2 days ago. Lancy, I saved this from my own meals. My parents don't even know. I've been worrying about you. Come take it. Lulin's face twisted with disgust. Take your stuff and leave. I don't want it. He kept pushing, kept squeezing forward, kept calling her Lancy like the word itself would unlock her door. Chinfong grabbed his collar with one hand and lifted, dragged him across the yard, and launched him into a snow bank. He ate snow face first, came up sputtering, pointing with a shaking finger. What right do you have? She's my brother's widow. I'm bringing her food. Chinfong stepped forward. His shadow swallowed the man whole. Your family watched these women starve and didn't crack your door open once. Now you show up with half a moldy sweet potato trying to buy what you couldn't earn. Let me make this simple. Lulin is mine now. She eats my food. She sleeps under my roof. Anyone who comes sniffing around her, I break them. Not metaphorically, literally. I will snap pieces off your body and use them for firewood. Now get out of my yard before I demonstrate. Jetsai scrambled backward through the snow like a crab who had just discovered religion, tripped over his own feet twice, and disappeared through the gate without looking back. Behind Chinfong, Lulin stood in the doorway with her mouth hanging open and her heart hammering so loud he could practically hear it from the yard. She had been called someone's woman in public by a man for the first time in 3 years, and judging by the color of her face, her entire cardiovascular system was not handling it well. Back at the Lee house, Jitsai tattled to his father like a schoolboy who had his lunch taken. Lee listened to the whole dramatic retelling and responded by doing the smartest thing that family had done all week. Absolutely nothing. You idiot, the old man said. Chinfong is a barefoot man who isn't afraid of people wearing shoes. You want to pick a fight with a lunatic who has nothing to lose. Over what? A widow you were trying to seduce with half a rotten potato? Final order, stay away from Chinfong. Survive the winter. Stop causing problems. Jetsai agreed out loud. His eyes said something different entirely. Chinfong would deal with that later, if it became relevant. The next morning brought rabbit tracks in the south woods, 5-wire snares set overnight, and the fat rabbits waiting in the traps when he went to collect. 5, maybe 6 pounds of rabbit between them in 1960 winter economics. He was holding the equivalent of a small fortune. Real meat, thick, dense, with actual fat content. The kind of food that keeps humans alive through January. He also saved a dying 18-year-old orphan named Zhao Hong that morning, half buried in a snowdrift at the base of the mountain. 3 raw sparrows from his pocket jammed into an unconscious mouth. Survival instinct did the rest. When Zhao Hong's eyes cracked open, Chinfong asked him one question. Wanna live? No small talk, no sympathy speech, just the question. Yes, no hesitation. The boy dropped to his knees in the snow and pressed his forehead to the ground. Brother Fong, my life is yours from today forward. 3 sparrows. That was the cost of acquiring a loyal soldier. Chinfong put him to work immediately. Become my eyes across the entire village, he said. Map every household. Who has food? Who is faking poverty? Who is hiding supplies? He taught the boy the Chinfong School of Village Intelligence. Check chimneys. Watch the children. Because kids cannot keep secrets. And if he really wanted to know who was eating, check what people dumped from their chamber pots. Zhao Hong stared at him like he had just revealed the meaning of existence through waste analysis. Brother Fong, how does your brain even work? Chinfong gave him one rule. You are invisible. You are a starving orphan nobody. People yell at you. You take it. People hit you. You take it. You do not exist louder than a shadow. Just bring me information. And then came the second assignment, the one Zhao Hong had to stop breathing for. Find me the hunting rifle. His eyes went wide, but Brigade Leader Xiao turned it into the commune. Chinfong shook his head. Xiao Fuyang is a fox wearing a human suit. You think an old fox surrenders the only gun that can stop a 200-pound boar from eating his grandchildren? The rifle is somewhere in this village. Find it. He sent Zhao Hong to shadow Xiao Yue, the brigade leader's son. The same genius he had recently planted face first into a snowdrift. That kid could not keep a secret if his mouth was sewn shut. If Daddy had a gun hidden at home, Junior would eventually brag about it. 3 sparrows, 1 rescued life, and just like that, Chinfong had eyes and ears across the entire settlement. A complete intelligence network powered by gratitude and raw frozen bird meat. That same evening, Annie Joe appeared near the village entrance, poking through the snow with a long stick. 42 years old, the village's most powerful broadcasting system. Information entered her ears and exited her mouth within hours, amplified, dramatized, and delivered to every doorstep free of charge. She spotted his bulging sack of rabbit. Her eyes locked on it like a targeting system acquiring a heat signature. He shifted the sack on his shoulder and walked toward her, with a plan already forming behind his smile. Yesterday, Zhao Hong. Today, Annie Joe. One gathered secrets quietly, the other destroyed secrets loudly. Both were now in his orbit. The spy network was for knowing things quietly. She was for making things known loudly. Every leader needs both. Whispers coming in and thunder going out. Back at the house, Liu was washing dishes without being asked. Quietly, head down, scrubbing with focused hands. Lulin exhaled a breath she had been holding since the day they met. The household had found its rhythm, imperfect, dysfunctional, built on a foundation of survival and stubbornness, but a rhythm nonetheless. Lulin ran the kitchen and managed Liu's emotions, Liu fought him publicly and surrendered privately. Shaolin provided comic relief and unconditional loyalty for the price of 1 chicken butt per day. And Chinfong did what he did best. Brought home food, made enemies, broke things, and somehow kept for people alive through sheer stubbornness and a stolen bow. Was it elegant? No. Was it sustainable? Barely. Was it better than being dead in a snowbank? Significantly. He had built, without planning it, exactly what every man in the village dreamed about. A house with 2 women cooking for him, a child who called him daddy, a full stomach every night, and a reputation scary enough that people crossed the street when they saw him coming. All it cost him was his dignity, his morals, and any chance of being remembered as a good person. Fair trade. The nights were still cold. The food was never enough. The Li family was still watching him from across the village with complicated feelings. Jetsai's eyes still carried the unfinished promise from the snowbank, a problem Chinfong kept filed under matters too small to care about today. But the rifle, that was a different category. That was a priority. With a bow, he could handle pheasants. With a slingshot, sparrows. But 1 wolf pack on that mountain, and he was bringing a stick to a tank fight. A gun changes everything. Range, power, fear factor. The man with the gun writes the rules. Everyone else reads them. Zhao Hong was out there right now, a hungry shadow pressed against walls, ears tuned to every whispered word, every secret crunch of food at midnight. The intelligence would come in. The rifle would surface. Chinfong had patience when patience paid dividends. And in the meantime, every morning followed the same rhythm. He rose before dawn. Lulin had hot water waiting. Liu was slightly less furious than the day before. Shaolin demanded to know what was for dinner before breakfast was finished. He grabbed his bow, pocketed his slingshot, and walked out into the frozen dark. The mountain was waiting. The birds were waiting. The rabbit trails were waiting. And somewhere in this village, a hunting rifle was waiting too. Lulin would stand in the doorway every morning, watching him disappear into the white. "Come home early. I'll hold things down here." She said it so naturally now, like she had always been saying it, like this had always been her doorway, and he had always been her hunter heading out. She was 2 days away from packing him a lunchbox and kissing him goodbye at the gate, and she was filling the position of someone who mattered without anyone officially assigning it to her. Lulin never complained. She just cooked, cleaned, managed the child, held her sister-in-law together, and watched the gate. Employee of the month, every month. And Liu, stubborn, brilliant, furious Liu, was changing too, slowly, against her own will. She still glared at him. She still muttered curses when he made her cook something. But she washed the dishes now without being told. She held Shaolin's hand through the cold nights. And sometimes, in the dark, when she thought everyone else was asleep, she would peek at him. Just a quick glance, just checking. Something was shifting beneath the anger, the terrifying realization that without him, they would already be gone. That this crude, vulgar, shameless man was the only reason any of them were still breathing. She was starting to be afraid of something far worse than his presence, his absence. For days ago, Chinfong had woken up in this body with nothing. No plan, no allies, no food, no future worth describing. Now he had a hunting operation, a household, a child who adopted him without asking permission, and to women who were slowly, stubbornly, undeniably becoming something more than burdens. He had an intelligence network run by a grateful orphan. He had a reputation that made grown men take the long way round. He had rabbit in the snares, sparrows on the wire, pheasant buried in the yard under the snow. And he had a rifle somewhere in this village, waiting to be found. None of this had been planned. None of it had been graceful. He had stumbled into every single advantage with his fists first, and his reasoning a half step behind. But that was the thing about survival. It does not care how you look doing it. It only cares whether you're still standing when the sun comes up. And every morning, Chinfong was still standing, cold, calculating, occasionally monstrous, frequently shameless, but standing. In a famine winter that had already swallowed half the village's hope, that was not nothing. That was everything. The fire in the stove crackled low. Shaolin was asleep, belly full, curled into her mother's side. Lulin sat by the dim lamp, mending something that did not need mending, just needing something to do with her hands. Liu lay on her side facing the wall, not asleep, not talking. Somewhere in the middle, where her pride and her exhaustion were still negotiating the terms of surrender. Chinfong leaned against the bed frame and looked at all 3 of them. 1 week ago, none of them would have chosen each other for anything. Now here they were, bound together by meat and desperation and the brutal arithmetic of staying alive. Some families are made by blood, some are made by choice, and some are made by famine and a stolen vow, and a man too stubborn to let anyone near him die. He did not say any of that out loud. He was not that kind of man. He just reached over, dropped another stick into the stove, and watched the flame catch. Outside, the temperature was dropping again. The mountain was silent under its blanket of white. Tomorrow he would go back up. Tomorrow there would be more tracks to follow, more traps to check, more mouths to feed. Zhao Hong would bring him something useful. The rifle would get one step closer to being found, and Jet Sai's unfinished eyes would still be watching from across the village, waiting for a moment that had not come yet. There were problems ahead, real ones, the kind that could not be solved with a slap and a countdown. But tonight, the fire was burning, the stove was warm, the house was quiet, and for the first time since waking up in this frozen, unfamiliar life, Chinfong felt something that was not calculation or hunger or cold anger, something quieter than that, something that did not have a useful name. He let it sit there for exactly 3 seconds, then filed it away in the same locked drawer as everything else he did not have time for. He closed his eyes. In 1960, in a northern village buried under snow, a man the world had written off as useless had become something no one expected. Not a hero, not a good person, not even close, but a provider, a protector in the roughest possible sense of the word. A man who showed up every single day with something dead over his shoulder and put it on the table. In a world where most men were hiding, that made him extraordinary. Not because he was kind. He was not. Not because he was righteous. He was absolutely not. But because when everything else ran out, when the food was gone and the warmth was gone and the hope was gone, he kept going anyway. Stubborn, shameless, surprisingly capable, and completely unwilling to lose. In a famine, that is the only currency that actually matters. And Chinfong had it in abundance.